that child's difficult journey did not begin with foster care. They had prior trauma points that they had to experience through no fault of their own, just experience it in their own family life, and then being removed from their family life, the only thing they knew, coming into an uncertainty. Even though there is goodwill in the Miracle Hill system of care, in my in the fostering idea system of care, and the partnership and all the other partnerships, from a child's vantage point, they are often missing the people that matter the most to them. Yes.
And welcome to Miracles from the Hill podcast, where we share raw stories that display the anatomy of God's grace here at Miracle Hill Ministries. If this is your first time joining us, please subscribe. And of course, you can like, comment, and leave a review. To connect with us, visit our website linked in the description box. And now, here is our host, Ryan Dirk.
Greetings, listeners, and welcome back to Season 3 of the Miracles from the Hill podcast. This season, we're continuing our journey into the experience of homelessness for children. Today, we are joined by David White, which we'll get into who he is here in a minute. We're excited to have him. We're going to focus more on youth today. If you're new, thanks for joining us. You're going to get an education today. If you're returning, you already knew that, and so you're excited to be here. So we're going to jump in, and I was blessed before I introduced David that he sent me an article this morning, a research article from Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago that kind of gives these ridiculous facts about youth and homelessness. So Chapin Hall did a research study of over 4,000 youth out of 22 counties across the nation. And here are their four main findings. This is going to set the stage for our discussion today. 29% of the 13 to 25-year-olds experiencing homelessness that they surveyed spent time in foster care. 44% of the 215 people they interviewed indicated that they'd spent time in foster care. Wow. So a big chunk of people who identify as experiencing homelessness that are in that age group. That was finding one. Finding two, I'm just going to read the paragraph because it's hard for me to pull out just a sentence here. However, the Voices of Youth Count in-depth interviews indicate that aging out is not the only pathway from foster care to homelessness. About half of the young people they interviewed spent time in foster care that actually exited through reunification or adoption. So as you guys have heard on previous episodes, those are kind of the main buckets of where kids go. They're reunified back to their family. They go into foster care. They might go into an adoption situation or kinship care or some variety of situations. But reunification and adoption would typically be viewed as the super positive outcomes, right? Right. And so over half that experiencing homelessness came through those exits. Finding three, young people experiencing homelessness who have been in the foster care differ from their peers who have not. Those who have been in foster care experienced significantly more adverse events on average than their peers who have no foster care history. And there are some buckets here on the right side of the page. So when you're looking at youth experiencing homelessness, if they've come from a foster care situation, they've spent more time in detention, jails, or prisons. More of them receive government assistance. Less of them are working or in school. More of them identify as LGBTQ. More of them live sheltered, but statistically significant amount more of them are living unsheltered. Wow. So if there's an experience of homelessness and you add in a foster care experience, the statistics get worse. And then the last main finding, nearly half, 44% of the 94 young people with foster care histories who participated in the Voices of Youth Count in-depth interviews identified placement in foster care as the beginning of their experience with homelessness. When we talk to people about homelessness here at Miracle Hill, they often don't think of foster care as homelessness.
That's right.
Right? They think of it as an offshoot or an adverse situation, but in reality, the child is being pulled from their home. So with that being said,
total trauma of removal,
which we talked about at great length in our episode on trauma. You should listen to it, David, when it comes out.
Very good.
So David White is the founder and CEO of Fostering Great Ideas. We're going to talk a lot about what Fostering Great Ideas is, and we're just going to flesh out kind of his story in discussion. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Super excited to have you here. So we always like to start at the beginning. So where we start from to get to where you are today?
For me, it's been a journey that began, I suppose, when I was born.
Yeah.
As I was born, the same week, the incredibly tragic killing of Martin Luther King took place. And I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. So I always felt that the King story was a story that all of us in Atlanta could embrace. And I had a particular fondness for learning it because of the oddity, just a simple way of thinking about things as a child or as a youth, that he and I had a connection. But really, King was a connection for everybody. He was a connection for people who've been severely oppressed, but really for everyone, to redignify and to reestablish our ties with other human beings and to build out what is possible. Within that simple little statement there of my birth, sort of silly, really, I then realized the Bible was behind a lot of my thinking in terms of taking care of the widows and orphans, the longing of a God for his people. And then as a youth, I worked at a homeless shelter in a soup kitchen for a couple months one summer.
In Atlanta?
In Atlanta. And found it to where the rights of these individuals was limited. They weren't being listened to in the way that they needed to be listened to be restored. And I learned not only to serve these individuals who were homeless, but also to eat with these individuals.
Amen.
And at that point, I started my lifelong journey of being with others.
Do you remember the name of the shelter? Was it Atlanta Union?
It was not Atlanta Union. It was an Episcopal church with a red door, and I think red door means that their mortgage was paid off, if I'm not mistaken.
Is that right?
But it was 2 months, and then I completed that and maintained, even in the first year of college, I was in a fraternity and did fraternity night Friday night, but then on Saturday mornings in my freshman year, I often went to the homeless area in Nashville, Tennessee, and hung out with the guys who are homeless there. And so my affinity for those who've been through hell, who've been through a lot of trauma, has stayed with me, and ultimately, as we'll talk about, landed into supporting children who live in foster care and the uncertainties of that for them.
But post-college, you didn't go straight towards helping others.
That's exactly right. I went straight towards helping myself, which is all right to do, I think. So stability is a part of this conversation for individuals who are homeless. Much of it and much homeless work goes towards housing first, stability first. And I've always been stable. I was very privileged in my upbringing. Stability is everything. And so I created stability for my own family and had very good corporate jobs. Spent some time in New York, which was enjoyable. And I was a mama's boy, so came back home to Atlanta. And then I got a master's in business. But then at the age of 34, I had my midlife crisis, my first and hopefully my only midlife crisis, and decided I did want to go back to what Martin Luther King's inspiration for all of us was, what the whole civil rights movement stated for all of us, especially growing up in Atlanta. I saw so much of it. Going back to what those individuals who were homeless told me about that they are to be heard and valued as people, no different than myself or my own family. And I said, I am going to now go change the world, whatever that means. I had no idea. Got a master's in social work by 36 and was on my way to Greenville, South Carolina to do early childhood work.
So you were working with adults as a youth. you're working with adults as a youth.
Yes, that's fine.
And then as an adult, you kind of flip the equation, and now you're going to work with youth. How does that happen?
I thought it odd. I really was very comfortable working with adults as a youth, and then realizing that so many people who are homeless, their stories, they want to be told, and they're so complicated and so uncertain. How do we solve the crisis they're experiencing if we are longing for their stability as I was expressing, as God longs for our own stability, our sense of, you are stable, wake up. You are with me, wake up, I am with you. That logic, being on the journey with someone who is homeless, is really hard to do, but it's something I embraced fully for adults. I had no interest in working on behalf of children or youth who are trending towards uncertainty and trauma and homelessness. But I found that if you go upstream and you work on behalf of the children, you solve so much more. So it was somewhat logical, but it was also just this innate sense that I wanted to belong, and I know other people want to belong. And when I feel isolated, I need people, and these children often feel isolated. So I went all in on children in foster care.
So you get to Greenville and you go to work where?
First Steps. I was an early childhood director for First Steps, my first gig in the nonprofit field. I learned two things. You lose a lot of money going in the nonprofit field, but you gain a lot of human value, a lot of beauty, and in a purpose-driven kind of life. Your values really become richly fulfilled, richly robust. You see them more clearly, and then you can see everything more clearly if you work on behalf of those who do not have voice. From that experience, 36 to 40, the children who had the worst statistics in academics, 3rd, 5th, 8th grades, reading, math statistics, are children who live in foster care. So by the age of 40, I said, I'm going to go all in on them.
So then, this idea for fostering great ideas begins to be birthed in your head. What's that look like?
It does. It's quite interesting. I had no idea of the homeless issue for youth coming out of foster care, the ones you started the podcast with. I had no idea the human trafficking issue. About a third of people who've been trafficked have lived in foster care. I had no idea of any of that. What I did know was that this was a population that we gave a ton for during Christmas. And then after that, I didn't really get what we did. Now, I did not know about the beauty of the churches who and the other faith-based groups who come around the foster parents. I didn't know that at the age of 40. I've learned that since, but all I saw was a ton of people, good-natured, good-willed people giving angel tree Christmas gifts for kids. And I was a foster parent by the age of 40, 41, something like that, and we got a ton of Christmas gifts. And I said, there's so much community goodwill. Could it not be distributed across the whole year? And there's many who do that in supporting often foster parents. But I said, what about supporting the child more directly in multiple ways? So Fostering Great Ideas was birthed at 40, when I was 42. I started the world of foster care arena about the age of 40. 42 was birthed, and I went full-time at 46. But it really was to advocate for children in foster care by bringing in a community response at all times of the year.
So I'm getting ready to ask you a question I don't know the answer to, because I don't think I've ever asked you. What does the name mean to you? You're the creator.
Well, I could have called it Fostering Pretty Good Ideas, but it wouldn't have gone anywhere. And it does not sound like a charity, so it is hard to get certain foundation donors. But a good number of people have figured it out. And it's quite nice when you go out there in the community and they say, oh, I've heard of that before. It's not a consulting agency. Fostering Great Ideas, what it means to me is this innovation think tank. I teach innovation as well at in the MBA level on the side at Clemson, and social impact entrepreneurship. It's really about how do we look at an intractable problem. You could say it homelessness. You could say the housing of 6% of our population enters foster care sometime in their childhood. The reality that 40,000 children or youth leave foster care aged out without permanency at the age of 18 to 21 every year across across the United States. All these intractable, sad situations. How do you solve it? And so Fostering Great Ideas humbly comes to it, I hope fairly humbly, and says, let's think about it. We're not going to house children. We're not in charge of that. But we are going to think on their behalf and with them. And they're going to become the responsive party to change the game.
So there's going to be somebody listening who, through our discussion, they're going to say, oh, I have a great idea.
That's right.
And I want to start my own nonprofit to do whatever.
Yes.
How do you go from having this great idea for Fostering Great Ideas and flesh it out to where it's an actual nonprofit? Like, what does that look like? What did it look like in your life?
Excellent. I've started 4 other projects in my life. They all, including Fostering Great Ideas, have been built tied on the concept of pivoting towards one another, connecting towards one another. I lived that when I was helping individuals who were homeless. I ate with them. Mm-hmm. I did not just serve them. And as such, I realized that in eating with somebody, breaking bread, in fellowshipping, in pivoting towards somebody, and being open to them, to that person, you can build so much better. So I built under a mindset that I am going to be in a learning experience through the building. If you think about entrepreneurship in general, there's the entrepreneurs who are like, I boldly go because I have a type A personality and no one will stop me. And then I boldly crash or get lucky. Or you build with a sense of some deliverable of just listening, and I'm going to learn through the process. So it was very quickly that I was in a learning experience. And I think the way I was able to build Fostering Great Ideas in that first 4 years, when I didn't take a salary from Fostering Great Ideas, it was on the side. I was doing 20, 30 hours a week. I could just simply think. So I created 8 great ideas during that time, and I started to pilot them in Greenville County, and then they moved into Spartanburg County in the upstate, and then some of them moved across the state, and one of them's all across the nation now. But they were all piloted because I had time to think, and I didn't have to take a salary from it. And then I had people behind me saying, encouraging me, you're doing a good work. And then I think ultimately as an entrepreneur, which I am, I was tenacious. I never stopped. Mm-hmm. So in answer to your question, there's a lot of great ideas out there. The key is if you stick with your values and you stick with a purpose-driven approach to life, and you know your client wants this, the children deserve better, and you don't damn everyone around you that you're not giving them better, but I can help and we can help. And you bring the whole community around you, then you've created a movement. And you put dignity first in the whole thing. And frankly, just going back to the beginning, wouldn't Martin Luther King be so proud of those who bring dignity first? That's what he created, a movement based on dignity. And I just emulate others who've gone before me. Mm-hmm. It's a movement for the rights of children in foster care.
So I think we should put an exclamation point, especially for those budding entrepreneurs, that 4 years,
right.
30 hours a week on top of you having to provide for your family.
Right.
And then you're able to go do it, right? Like you had to put in, sweat equity to make it happen, and it didn't happen fast.
It is the way it is.
It is the way that it is. So when you're thinking through this and you're bringing people together, I think that there's some really positive irony there, right? Like one of the things that you and I would point to for the experience of those in foster care is the deep need for healthy community. And that's how you built Fostering Great Ideas. It's through the same thing, because we all need it.
Yeah.
Right? Whether we're in foster care or we're trying to build a nonprofit to help foster care. Right. It's a huge need. Okay, so you come up with the idea, and through that, you discern these kind of core values for the organization. So what are those core values?
The funny thing is, if you start anything that's a movement, or anything that's entrepreneurial, if you have these core values, you might be surprised if it starts to work. You might be surprised your core values never changed. And that means that they were your values, and your values are always going to come through if you live a value-driven life. And that's beautiful. And so the values have never changed. And it was that children matter. Simple concept. As I said, I never thought about serving on behalf of children. It was always the adults who were homeless. But then once I realized children matter, and my own children, that I can listen to them and not just judge them or make an agenda for them. That's a hard thing for me to do as a parent. But for people who are in foster care, they're in a controlled environment. And to have a voice to listen to them, children matter. Once we start there, that's a great value to start with. And then that relationships are key. It's phenomenal. I had no idea how important relationships are key would be to these children. I thought it was, services, resources, references, all these concepts that go in with the child welfare system across the nation. But if you look at this true math, the true numbers, those who are moving away from the homelessness statistics, the human trafficking statistics, the fill-in-the-blank statistics, are those who have had relationships that matter to them fleshed out while they lived in foster care. That's it. Long-term relationships that matter to the children is the game. So the second value is relationships is key. And the third is the community can now do something of high value if we all come together as one. So children matter, relationships are the key, and community engagement. Stick with those three, you can build a whole framework for children in foster care.
Amen. So you've got these kind of three buckets that you guys are doing work in. So we're going to play off your sheet here. I'm going to give the statistics that go under this bucket, and then you talk about what are the great ideas that you have going on in each one, and we'll flesh each one out. So the first bucket is supporting children, and so here are the stats that David notes on his document. Only 23% meet standardized testing scores in English. Only 14% meet standardized testing scores in math. For youth who age out of foster care, 54% have a mental health disorder in young adulthood. 32% of human trafficking victims spent time in foster care. Only 56% complete high school, and only 9% earn a college degree. So what are the great ideas to help support children?
I am not fun at a cocktail party because I use those statistics, and man, your listeners, I'm sure they're like, they're getting their second cup of coffee. They're trying to figure what the heck. I had no idea. That first statistic is what spurred me as a statistic. I'm a statistician by heart. It was what spurred me to know that I had something I could build. I had the point of knowledge of the goodwill of the whole community, not just for Christmas. I had that. I knew we could build this community engagement.
Sure.
I had the knowledge of my own desire for belonging. I had the knowledge of those who are homeless, who I said, I can talk to you and you can talk to me, and we learn from each other. I had all those knowledges, but the statistic is what grounded me in knowing I could change a statistic. And that was academics, because I come from First Steps, early childhood. I saw the statistic early on. That specific academic, let's go to the math one, 14%. It's the same thing for the English. The study comes out of California. It's the largest statistical population group, so it's equal in any state. But in California, of the standardized test scores, 36% of all children score at math meet or exceed status. 36% is terrible. For the children in foster care, 14%. Why the disparity? So as a part of Fostering Great Ideas, I consider why the disparity and realize that if they have a tutor, well, would that resolve some level of the disparity? Well, of course it would. Well, then you go a little deeper. Well, there's already infrastructures for tutor systems. There's tutor systems in Title I schools. There's tutor systems in after-school programs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But from a child standpoint in foster care, I am in an uncertain place in my foster home. And if I see this person who's controlling me, who calls herself mom, foster mom, and I sort of like her, but I have my allegiances back to my own mom, I may or may not listen to her as she says, you need to do your homework, and this is how. Because I'm feeling a little controlled right now, and I need a little more help so I don't feel controlled. So within that, we bring a tutor into their home. How different than, okay, you're going to have a tutor at a group session, then come back home. In that tutor, the volunteer coming into that home environment, that foster home, the child starts talking to this tutor because the tutor is very encouraging and saying, you can do math. You can do third grade math. You can do fifth grade. You can do ninth grade, whatever it might be. You can do English. And then the foster mom is right around the corner making dinner and saying, I knew you could do it, Joe. I'm so proud of you. And thank you so much, tutor. And the child sees two people that the child wants to please. Aha. Every child gets the opportunity to please an adult, their parent generally. For a child in foster care, your adult's removed from you. You only see them at family visits at this point. You don't have many opportunities to please them. The parent, the foster caregiver, could be very controlling in your mindset because they're not your parent, but you're trying to relate to them. And then another person comes in, and these two people who are both exceptionally interested in your academics are both giving you the green light, thumbs up, and you then respond. Your ability academically, we've been very surprised positively on how great it is. That model that really makes children in foster care feel valued in their academic achievements. So you look at all these concepts, these concern points, and then you build something from it. And building something from it makes a big impact, not only for the child today, but also it really limits the concern points later on. It lowers them significantly in terms of homeless populations, in terms of human traffic populations, because you're building relational rapport the whole time.
So I'm sure that you see, dividends of growth immediately, right? Like, so their scores are going up.
Right.
Can you track that long term to see how that relational equity that they're building with that tutor relationship affects them long term academically?
Yes, we're doing that tracking definitively. The tutor program is fairly new for us.
Okay.
I mentioned it sort of an early indicator for me, the statistic,
Yeah.
but I didn't actually create the tutor program until 2020 basically, right? COVID world, 2019.
Lots of
started
thinking.
to think about it. I actually went full in on college first, which was a mistake in hindsight. But I went for a college program, which was great, and we've adjusted that. Now it's any dream you have when you leave foster care, we call it Aspire. It's a dream shop. We have a life coach, and you live out your dreams. We have social capital built through community investment of people who are caring about them, taking out a youth to learn about financial literacy, taking them to lunch to talk about how they think about financial literacy from a financial analyst, these kind of things. But if you take a step back, that's all in the youth world. It took me quite a while to realize that I had to go way back to the child world. So the majority of our tutor relationships are actually for children. So we've been having that really strong, these quantifiable moments and indicators for over a year and a half at this point. But that is still in the early stage. We have 50 tutors right now across 13 counties.
Wow.
My vision, all this has vision, but my vision is that every youth and every child in foster care who is behind in school will move up in school through the goodwill of a volunteer who comes into that foster placement, that foster home, and works with the foster parent to challenge and to support a child who simply wants to do well.
So you've got Tutor Match, and can you talk a little bit more about Aspire?
Yeah. So Aspire is really the game changer. That coupled with Life Support, our mentor program. If you mentioned, long-term statistics, long-term quantifiables, Life Support's the game changer that we know because we've had it since 2012. So we'll go into that. But Aspire specifically says you, as a youth, 14 to 26 years old, can have a life coach. Now, this is not unusual in foster care. It is certainly something that's done in other states. How we sort of make it a great idea, fostering great ideas, is we build it in a coupling mode. We complement it with two other concepts. And as a result, we definitively change stats. The concept of life coaching is somebody who has also lived in foster care. 3 of our 10 employees have lived in foster care when they were children. Someone who has also lived in foster care is a certified life coach and is saying, I am no longer a foster child. I am a human being, and I value myself. And you may think of yourself only as a foster child, but I'm going to help you to think to where you are a human being and you value yourself.
So that sounds like a unicorn. Formerly in foster care, certified life coach.
Yeah.
Do you struggle to find those people, or
No.
there's a huge amount?
It is a huge amount because of another component, which is sort of cool, Ryan. So we didn't start with Aspire. Perhaps if we had started with Aspire for our youth work, it would have been a unicorn. If you age out of foster care, under 10% of you will get a college degree. We've seen the stats about homelessness, et cetera, et cetera. It is very hard to find somebody who says, I want to deal with foster care. I've been in foster care and I'm not, and I'm ready for this. However, if you develop your whole platform to a place where former foster youth want to be, they love fostering great ideas. They speak on our behalf at our benefit events. They speak on behalf of reform with fostering great ideas as their platform. Then you find a lot of individuals, and I do mean a lot, who are succeeding and are ready to help the next generation. So what we found was we started our mentor program called Life Support in 2012. We've had a lot of support over the years with Miracle Hill with our mentor program. We've had 13 adoptions from mentors adopting youth, several through the Miracle Hill system. And within that, all the relationships that began 5+ years ago, about 22% are still intact. And as a primary relationship of this young adult, now going through young adulthood, their mentor. So it's huge. So you build that, you have that. And then we built this concept of college-oriented. We put 48 youth, guided them into Greenville Tech. Their retention rates were comparable to other Greenville Tech students versus youth from foster care, which was much lower. They are now feeling responded to as human beings versus case managed. They no longer have a social worker. I'm a master's in social work. I can say that. You don't want a social worker in your life for a long period of time. They feel like they have a coach now, and they are now on their own road to recovery, on their own road to their own dreams through Aspire. And then you complement this connection with a mentor, with this coaching with a life coach, with one third aspect. And that is reform. You become, if you're one of these individuals, you become a reform agent. We call that speak up. And you advocate on behalf of those still in the system. So you are not only connected to someone who cares for you long-term, the mentor, you're now connected to a coach who will help you to think, problem solve. And now you have the ability, if you want, to tell your story the way you want to tell it, and then to say, I want to reform foster care. And that you have an advocate coach through us as well.
So this great idea is the marriage of multiple great ideas.
Yeah, it morphed itself. And it's a very sweet spot right now.
Okay, so I want to come back and talk about life support, but we're going to save that for the end because I want to dig a little bit deeper on it. Let's go to your second bucket, which is restore families. So the first stat I will say is over half of siblings are separated when they enter foster care. I've talked about this in previous episodes, but it's stacking traumas, right? You have the trauma of being pulled from your home, and then you stack another trauma where you're separated from the only remaining family you have, that being your siblings. 27% of children who reunify with their parents re-enter foster care. So that, again, stacking traumas, one trauma on top of the next. 36% of children are adopted by a relative rather than a traditional, the way people think, foster family. Right. So what are the great ideas under restore families? The first one's my favorite.
very, very good. It is for a lot of people. Sib-Link is a favorite of many. If I could take your listeners have heard a lot, and there's so much in this, but I do want to state that all this is a combined effort to have community engage at every point of a child's difficult journey through the state of foster care. That child's difficult journey did not begin with foster care. They had prior trauma points that they had to experience through no fault of their own, just experience it in their own family life, and then being removed from their family life, the only thing they knew, coming into an uncertainty. Even though there is goodwill in the Miracle Hill system of care, in my system in the Fostering Great Ideas system of care, and the partnership and all the other partnerships, from a child's vantage point, they are often missing the people that matter the most to them. Yes. So Fostering Great Ideas, the first idea actually is not on the list that that I gave you. It's actually a great idea that still does exist called Thanksgiving Grace. And we have it every year. We generally pick a local church and we ask children in foster care to join us whose family members, parents and relatives, are doing pretty well on their treatment plan, the reunification plan. So social services says, hey, they should have Thanksgiving together. Not only that, everyone should, but we're going to help make it happen. They give us the referrals. We have a beautiful potluck. The community comes together and serves a wonderful turkey the weekend before Thanksgiving. And the children then say, I had Thanksgiving, the family meal with my family. It's so incredibly restorative. You think about the dignity movements of the civil rights world, and it's all about restoring dignity to that entire family group through a simple matter of Thanksgiving. It's a no-brainer. And so I love the idea of building in a response where relationships, especially family relationships, are the key to a person's healing. So now, Sib-Link. If you are in foster care and you are going through the uncertainty of knowing that your brother or your sister is separated from you, which happens in over half the cases anywhere in the nation, then you are removed from so many, as you had stated, Ryan. Sib-Link says we are going to acknowledge that, and then we are going to have a sibling-only visit for you and all your sibs, wherever they are in the foster care system. It's awesome. In 2022, we managed over 300 sibling visits, always in partnership with DSS, social services, always in partnership with the caregivers who can come to the family visits, sibling visits. We welcome them to come to the sibling visits. We pay their mileage to come to the sibling visits. And with the guardian ad litems or the CASAs, we want them to be there. We want everyone to see that these children, when they're going to see their parent, they're vying for their parent. They're not lovey-dovey with each other. If you now have that, but then you add another visit, which is, hey, Sibs, do you guys want to see your brothers and sisters? Oh, my goodness. And in those first 3 or 4, there's so much risk of thought, oh, well, they don't do well when they're with their parent. I get it. They're all vying for the same mom or the same dad. But if you give us the opportunity, social services, our caregivers, our guardian ad litems, to have them see each other routinely every month in a fun, engaging way at a sibling-only visit, and we'll have you there, we'll have us there, there'll be adults there. But they start to realize this is going to happen every month regardless of whether my parent shows up, because they're not going to be there or not. You know, a typical family visit, your anxiety is high because you're like, well, will my mom even show up? Half the times the mom or dad parental rights are terminated. So that's a real anxiety for children. But your sibling will always show up. They'll be provided. So you, at 3 or 4 or 5 times, game on. The anxiety's lower. The relationships between caregivers see each other. Adoptive parties think about now, well, should I adopt one of the sibling sets? It's a game changer.
So on top of the visits, do they also have opportunities to like communicate by, Zoom or FaceTime or whatever the case may be?
Very good. Very true. I never want to talk about COVID again in my life, but during the COVID years, we created a virtual platform for sibling visits. And we make it fun. We do like Hangman or a word search, things like that. They can open up presents. We do sibling birthdays. All in all, we did over 60 sibling birthdays in 2022. Largely half of them virtual, half of them in person, something like that. And so you'd open up your birthday present from your brothers and sisters on the Zoom call.
Sure.
So these are important concepts. We try to make the virtual experience really engaging for the children and youth.
David, what are the long-term stats for sibling groups? Like I guess it just goes into the general stats, but how many of them wind up back together in the same home?
Right. Excellent. So half of all children will go back to their place of origin, their family, their parents.
Right.
And then a good number will go back to relatives. South Carolina DSS has done an excellent job of welcoming kinship parties.
Yep.
So it's going more towards the national trend of about a third of all children in foster care live with kinship. And that is a great opportunity for adoptions later on because they're blood. And then we had the non-relative foster parents, and then teachers, mentors, tutors, and guardian ad litems and CASAs all helping out to adopt as able. And then 10% of children will age out when they're 18 to 21. Within all those groupings, the component of sibling care is either known or not known. I did foster care arena, I've been involved in 14 years. For 2 years, I never thought about siblings. So you're considering, when you're in a placement, everybody's considering the behavior issues that are coming out because of trauma removal and all these other dynamics. They're considering clinical responses. They're considering resources to certain groups to help on mental health, to help on physical health, et cetera, needs. They're dealing with the school situation with a child who has basically a thing that says foster kid on my back, and everybody's response to that child. All these things. And well, you see your family, these family visits. Sometimes mom shows, sometimes she doesn't, depending on the situation, the case, the family. And then the rigmarole of all that when they come back into their foster home or group home, right? So the concept of siblings can become, it was for me for 2 years. I didn't even think about it when I first started in this world. Sibling care is not a big deal. So, but if you talk to children in foster care and you say, tell me more about your brother or your sister, then you get the answers. And then you know how critical it is. Now, does the system, meaning all of us who are adults who've never lived in foster care, I've never lived in foster care, do we actually change during the process? Do we improve our civil rights component, our rights of sibling rights through the process? There's nothing in the system to help us towards that, unless there's an innovative child welfare agency who says siblings are important. The family court says the parents are important. And siblings need to connect. But there's nothing that says you have to see your siblings every month.
Yeah, there should be.
There is a law, there is a settlement, and South Carolina DSS works a lot with fostering great ideas, and they champion our love of sibling rights. So the settlement actually ties itself into sibling rights. But it is a long, hard slog, because you're dealing with crisis for children. And in the crisis, you may or may not ask them, where are your siblings, and do you care about seeing your sibling all the time? And they live an hour away, and how is this going to take place?
So, Sib-Link is a great Band-Aid on a wound, but salve to the wound is more foster families willing to take sibling groups. like that doesn't solve the problem, but it certainly eliminates some of the trauma.
It's a very interesting, right? If you think about in our sort of overriding theme of homelessness, youth homelessness, to help individuals in the homeless who work on behalf of homelessness, to help them consider pre-homeless, the child in foster care, and what the child is thinking, and how to keep people from homelessness, build relationship rapport that's long-term. It's not as easy as it sounds to help people to think that way. Relationships are not the normal Medicaid packages. The Medicaid packages are services, clinical stuff, making sure the kid has a home, these kind of things. What happens once they're homeless? If you take a step back, you begin to realize that we cannot solve the structural issues often. This may sound terrible from an entrepreneur who deals with structural issues, but even a good policy does not change practice unless there's innovators willing to change the practice and willing to change the narrative. So the narrative on youth needs to be changed anywhere you look across the nation. These youth are youth who need a relational response versus another system designed referral response. Just to be, that's probably a little too, there's subtleties within that, of course, but a relational response is where you need to start. There's not money in relational responses. So who comes up with them? Well, you have to have think tanks that come up with them, and you have to have lawsuits that come up with them, and you have to have response points. But through all of this, the foster parents still can only take 1 or 2 kids.
Yeah.
So you just have to accept that. And when you accept that, I would say the Band-Aid or the salve, the wound is significantly healed because when you bring siblings together on a monthly basis, if you can do it robustly across the whole state, and that's our next vision, it's our big bet for 2023. We're on a cusp of a huge change in sibling care. And if you lead as an innovator, whether you're in the system or you're outside the system, and say, I cannot force, for lack of a better word, a nice family who wants to take 1 or 2 children to take 4 children.
Yeah.
I know I can talk about it. I can educate. If you can take siblings, you have a much better chance of receiving children in your care, and they probably will do better. But even as a former foster parent, we only had 1 of the 5.
Yeah.
But I can say this. If you can anchor your mindset down to the idea of the rights of siblings is a right that cannot be denied, then you have to, as an ethical society, respond in a way that looks at all your limitations and builds out comprehensive plans across an entire state to where siblings have that right met. Namely, they are interacting with each other on a regular and I would say monthly basis. And if you do that, you solve an enormity of issues, and you then pivot foster parents to the idea of taking siblings. Aha. Like we incentivize by, there's one of our donors who every time a foster parent brings a sibling to one of our sibling visits, we gave them 50 cents on the dollar for mileage. Foster parents need just as much education on this matter as anyone else.
Sure.
But they often will only change for the sibling rights approach, because I didn't think about it growing up or when I was a foster parent, when they see siblings interact and then they say, of course.
So I don't know that you know the story I'm going to share. I'm going to guess you do. And I'm going to use it to get us to our next bucket. So we've got a staff member who became licensed as a foster parent. And really, long story short, he learned about this sibling group, 4 kids. And so this staff member of ours and all of his siblings all got licensed and all adopted one from this sibling group.
Really? I had no idea.
Yeah. So now all the siblings have one of the kids, and there's one other family that's not part of their family. But long story short, now this sibling group are legally first cousins and siblings.
Yeah.
So none of those families could take one, but innovatively, they said, none of the families could take more than one, but innovatively, they said, we'll take this sibling group together.
That's great.
As a community,
Yeah.
so that the siblings have, weekly interactions and now they're still legally together, just
That's wonderful.
one step removed, which is a fascinating
That's a great
way
story.
of handling that situation, which gets us to connect communities. So here are the 3 stats that you put down here. 25% of foster homes remain open beyond 2 years. Over 10,000 participants have experienced this life-changing workshop of Life in Limbo, and 20,000 youth age out of U.S. foster care annually. So what are the great ideas that you have in Connect Communities?
Right. So if we go back to our 3 common values, and if you think about those values as being the core to keep youth in foster care out of homelessness, if you think about that, they're all relational driven values. One is children matter. One is relationships are key to any change that's meaningful. And the third is that the community can make the difference in partnership with all the system designers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's think about the first one. Only a quarter of all foster parents stay in the game past the 2-year licensing process. That's a national number. That says a lot. Now, we know already across the nation and in any state, I suppose, the turnover of those who are the case managers in foster care, the social workers and the like, who have a big burden. And they, if you work with a caseworker, you should give them some flowers and tell them you appreciate what they do. That's an amen to that. If you are a foster parent, if you're in a community group, a church, a faith-based group of any sort, you're in a special place, and you'll have people who care about you. A lot of times those foster parents, I loved one church told me once, said, hey, David, what we do in our ministry, foster care adoption ministry, is we say, hey, are you doing okay, foster parent? And if they say yes 3 different times when we ask, we know they're not telling the truth. And then we say, we really want to help you. We want to support you. Tell us what your raw emotions are and tell us how difficult your experience is. If you get those faith-based groups behind you, if you don't have a faith community, if you get others behind you who are affiliated with how you handle, if you're working with youth or sibling, your affiliation of they're experiencing what I'm experiencing, you can change that number of only 25% will be licensed after the first renewal process, after 2 years. That is a huge problem. So if you consider that's very high turnover, that's on the backs of children. One of the key reasons I think our mentor program and our life coaching and our reform work told by those who've lived in foster care, the foster youth, and our sibling work and our parent work and our all the different components, it's needed, is because of the turnover within all the people who are doing the good work in the system who become burned out.
Yep.
If you consider the homeless population as 29% of all homeless youth and young adults have said, I used to live in foster care, about half of those were homeless when they were with their birth family as well, when their family. So it's an entire dynamic of, and a good number of them, over half, said, I first started thinking I was homeless when I was in foster care, right? So you're thinking that because you got huge turnover numbers. The system, by nature of being a system that defines itself by resolving stress, which is the foster care system, even with great innovators, and our state has great innovators in the leadership at DSS, no question. Even with that, the need for a community response that says, I'm going to support the foster families, I'm going to support the kinship caregivers, but I'm also going to support the child wherever they're located because of the turnover of foster families, because of the turnover of caseworkers, is required. You need that tutor to go into any home that child goes into. Those mentors, the ones that are 5+ year old relationships, 22% still intact after over 5 years. Any one of those mentors could tell you that they were mentoring that youth in multiple placements. The hubris of our human experience as these savers, as people who say, oh, now they're with us. If we have that level of hubris, which definitely enters the foster care world, then we remarkably do not notice that many youth in foster care still do not feel like this is their home. And as a result of varied, complex stress points within that home, and because of a whole bubble around you as a foster parent, there are a lot of children who have to move. And when they move, that entire faith-based network does not move with them. And that is a point of sobriety that the church itself, which has done a remarkable work on behalf of children in foster care, has to really come to grasp with. And then how do you keep the guardian ad litem or the CASA as the constant, the volunteer who is outside of the faith community but is welcoming of the faith community, or the mentor, or the tutor, or the life coach? How do you keep those involved? Well, you have to invite them in the first place.
So the point is to create some type of stability of relationship in a system that's defined by instability of relationship.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. So, Miracle Hill, our mission statement points towards healthy relationships and stability. We've done whole episodes on this podcast about mentoring at Miracle Hill, not as it relates to children, but as it relates to adults. Our addiction recovery programs would point to a 40+% success rate after a year. We would say that if somebody has two factors in their life that their chances of success are much, much higher. Mentoring and transitional housing.
Yeah.
And those point towards
Good.
healthy relationships and stability. So
Right.
you've talked a lot about both of those things, stability and healthy relationships. And part of Fostering Great Ideas, bread and butter, is your mentoring program,
It is.
which we are unbelievably grateful for at Miracle Hill and have relied on you guys to provide for years. So let's talk about that. Let's kind of we'll walk towards the end talking about mentoring. What is mentorship as it relates to foster care? What does it look like at Fostering Great Ideas?
That's great. So yeah, the partnership has been a delight over the years, and it's been a delight because it was funny. Reed Lehman noted that when y'all had a group home, that at a event after the group home care, there was alumni. The young man said, "Hey, you gave me everything, but I really wanted even more a relationship that lasted beyond the group home," something of that sort.
Right.
And it really affected Reed a lot, and that's where the partnership began. He was very inviting to Fostering Great Ideas, and I want to acknowledge that. Within the world of mentoring, what does it look like? It looks like basically a Big Brothers Big Sisters model. In fact, I went in 2011, 2012, I went to Big Brothers Big Sisters and I said, "Hey, I don't want to step on your turf. Do you mentor youth with this logic of twice a month face-to-face engagement? I will go to Waffle House with you. You'll see me all the time. And I'll then report back to keep a safety framework. It'll always be public places to the case team, and we'll go along this journey together. And I'm going to stay multi-year. And from an aspect of a youth, that says, well, I don't know who this person is really, and do I really want this? Sooner or later becomes a youth's decision, and we accept that. And then when a youth starts moving, they're like, whoa, I really want this. This person actually did contact me. There was another group at home early on, and it was funny. We've mentored all their youth over time. And early on, before the youth had a clue as to what was going on, that we really were going to be in the game regardless. One of them said, or several of them said, "Do you guys get paid for this?" And the volunteers said no. At that moment, Ryan, someone says, "I matter to another human being." Mm-hmm. That's it. So the concept of mentoring, it's almost, it's not secondary, but it's definitely structured. You have, all our mentors have a significant amount of support. Our mentor, our director of mentor relationships, contacts 30, 40 mentors every month. How are you? Tell me more. In addition to the reporting structure, you get a feel as a mentor that you are highly supported. And then that allows for the support of the youth to know I have someone at all times. Not dissimilar to a guardian ad litem or CASA, a court-appointed volunteer who looks on behalf of what's going on the case and stays involved in the case and gets to know the youth and children. It's actually a complementary role to the CASAs and the guardian ad litems. And many CASAs, guardian ad litems refer youth to us.
Sure.
And for that compliment. But from the standpoint of what happened in 2012, it really was that a gentleman at DSS, Byron Dindy, a great friend of mine, saw a group of 40 youth and said, "Hey, would you like a mentor in your life? This person will stay with you regardless of what happens in foster care." And 22 of them raised their hand. And then two churches who have foster care ministries, I primed them. We might need some volunteers. They put me in touch. Each gave me 10 to 12 of their adults who are willing to now be mentors. And so we immediately brought those 22 youth to a point of mentorship. And then from that, we've moved from there really well. Now, I must say in mentorship, women love to mentor. And it is gender specific in our mentoring, not in our tutoring. If you are a woman in Greenville County, we often saturate. We have too many women. We need always more men. And if you're in another county, we're not saturated at all, so come along. If you are a lady in Greenville County specifically, consider being a tutor. that is growing, and it needs more and more tutors, because tutoring is about for any age, and it's really a response for them. But mentoring is specifically for youth, and it's complemented with our life coaching, and it's complemented with our reform work.
That's that combo you were talking about earlier.
That's right.
So, Billy Bob or Sue is listening right now, and they're wondering what kind of training comes along with being a mentor. Like, how do I become a mentor? Obviously, they reach out to you, but what does that process look like?
Right. Well, I've actually never met anybody named Billy Bob. So I look forward to Billy Bob
Bob
calling
Thornton.
me.
He's
Oh,
an
that's
actor,
true, actually.
right?
Very good.
At least one.
That's great. Billy Bob, contact me, please. The training is tied to a couple areas of interest, namely, why do children enter foster care? And then what are the three issues that children in foster care all deal with that most people don't deal with at their level? And though they are a loss where no one has died, I have a loss of my family. Mm-hmm. So your response as a mentor is to listen, purely to listen. And then the second concept they deal with that we train on is shame. Was it my fault that I'm in foster care? I had the tag foster kid written on me, all over me. They're talking about me all the time. I'm damned. I was brought here with a garbage bag. You got to be kidding me. So your response, if someone feels shame, is by letting them know they are totally worthy as a mentor. And then finally, the third thing we train on loss and shame and your responses as a mentor. Then we train on trauma, which seems like the most normal one to train on. But really, you got to think about loss as a biggie, and then shame is a biggie. And then you can talk about trauma. Trauma says, I've had something in my life that not only I saw and I felt, but has stayed with me. And that is keeping me from being no longer afraid or no longer anxious or in a point where I feel stability. It's keeping me from all that. So your mentor response is to be consistent and to accept me for who I am, and to know that anytime you give me a sense of praise that I am doing step to step something, acknowledge it. Look for it. Find it. Those who age out of foster care, 5 years later, they did a study, a quarter have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. We have significant empathy for war veterans who have PTSD. We lose our empathy very quickly for youth who have PTSD who live in foster care because they are behavior challenged individuals in our homes. That's why we need to respond in ways that are responsive to them, namely giving them all the relationships that matter to them at the forefront and all throughout the experience of foster care.
So how long does a mentor commit to the relationship?
As one mentor said to me, who's mentored about 3 or 4 youth at this point, including Miracle Hill, kids at Miracle Hill, he said, David, I wish I never met you. His life changed with mentoring.
Sure.
And then he left us actually 3 or 4 years ago, and he went to do some other things. And he came back to me recently. He said, my life has been a whirlwind of recent. He went through a divorce. And now I reflect back at my favorite time as in adulthood. My most purposeful time was being a mentor with you guys. So I'm back.
So that's your way of saying forever.
It is.
Potentially.
We have 100 mentor relationships. About 50, 60 of the youth are in foster care. The rest are out of foster care, where the relationship is still quite vibrant. In that group of 100, in a year since 2013, 2014, over half are over a year old.
How many mentors choose to get licensed as foster parents?
A good number of them. So also, interesting dynamic is in our training, we talk about what happens if the youth says, will you adopt me or will you foster me? Because 10, 20% of you will have that question. And I always tell mentors, hey, don't go the route of, if I could, I would, or not this year, but maybe next year. You're giving false premises. What you want to do is saying, my relationship with you as a mentor is very meaningful to me, and I hope to you, and I will stay in this relationship as long as we continue going forward in your time in foster care and afterwards. That is a very reassuring tone, and you build that out, and you don't have to worry about not being where the child is needing someone to long to. Please be my foster parent. Once you change the dynamics, and you're the foster parent or the adoptive parent, you become the control person. In which case, everything goes to a different level.
Yeah, it's a completely different relationship.
So what we say is, there's no question. We've had 13 adoptions of our mentors adopting the mentees. That's great. But there's also no question we've had, and I haven't done a true study of it, but 40 plus last time I was looking, sort of doing a simple count, over time of the 500 plus mentor relationships we've had since 2012. So I guess 10% or so have definitively have become foster parents.
And so, we've talked in previous episodes, and I don't want to get into it, about the choices the child has when they turn 18, right?
Yeah,
so
very good.
There's a variety of different things that could happen. How many of those mentor relationships, regardless of the child's choices, maintain post 18?
A lot. So we've been really pleased. So with partnership with the state has something called the YAY Council, Youth Engagement and Advocacy Council. It's foster youth. Kudos to the state of DSS to making foster youth's voice important. And we are their primary partner in that we bring our Speak Up great idea into the game by helping these youth learn to become their best advocates. All right. As a part of this, in 2021 and 2022, the state signed an agreement, a law that allows for youth to be robustly cared for much better than they were when they're 18 to 21 in foster care, plus some additional components after that. So the state took a strong stance, and the youth voice was key to that law, the bill becoming law. All right. So if you look at that, the youth want a response after 18. They want to be in stability after 18. They don't want to go homeless. 22% who leave foster care, that first year, they're going to go homeless in some measure in a longitudinal study. They don't want that. However, when you're 18, you're like, freedom.
Yeah.
And you're in a controlled state, a system, you're a ward of the state. And even though there's a tendency to the whole system saying, stay, it is very difficult to stay, because your goal is to go back to family if you can. And then that may or may not work out for you. Now, truly, I did a study, 3, 4, 5 years ago of our mentored youth, and 2/3 of them went past their 18th birthday and stayed in foster care, which just anecdotally is significantly better than typical. So it is that relationship that said, I'm going to be with you regardless, because they are, but it probably would be good to stay past 18.
Yeah. Yeah, rather than being out on your own. 18, I can't imagine 18 in 2023. Okay, last question, 2-part question. So there is somebody listening who hears how you're filling some of these gaps, right?
Right.
And they want to get involved. So how would you instruct them to go about being introduced to fostering great ideas and getting plugged into what you guys have going on? Second part of the question is, what are the last things you'd like to tell people about, what Fostering Great Ideas is looking forward to in the future?
That's great. In terms of the first question, I would ask them actually to contact me. I know maybe not the best idea if you have a lot of listeners, but I think it would help me. I think it would allow me I'm going to ask them the question, well, what did you learn in the podcast? What are your interest areas? And then
they're going to go back and re-listen and take notes.
I know. I got to listen to the whole podcast. So that would be where I would start. If they really are attuned to this, if they've stayed this whole time together, they really are special people. And I would love to envision that with them within our organization or elsewhere. You had mentioned, Ryan, very appropriately, what about taking care of sibling sets? What about being a foster parent for sibling sets or a foster parent for youth instead of group home experience? Of those who are human trafficked later on and those who go homeless later on, the majority have been in the group environments for a part of their youth, right? In a group environment, you're under fluorescent lights, regardless of anything else. If it's a great group, great. But you're with a lot of other kids who are really pissed off for the situation they're in. You need to be in a home where you can open up the refrigerator door and you can mow the lawn and you can do all these other normal things. And that requires the entire state foster care system to acknowledge and to say, I am willing to take a youth. So I would open them up, their thoughts, to many avenues to care for children.
Sure.
Now, if we think about the 2023 big bets or big ideas of fostering great ideas, that's huge. So I'm always into the theme of the year. The theme of this year is storytelling. Storytelling of all these beautiful relational responses is really robust for us right now. Our big bets, I'll give us 3 just to close us out. The first one I've talked about, it's a comprehensive approach that's relational driven to 14 to 26-year-olds who live in foster care, where the comprehensive approach is has 3 parts. 1, I'm connected to a mentor, regardless of what happens to me in foster care. 2, I'm connected to a life coach who has also lived in foster care and will help me to move away, if I need to, from a survivor mode or even a victim mode to a one who thrives in all my dreams being met and building up my social capital and my economic mobility opportunities. And then thirdly, I am now an advocate for change. Someone said, you can tell a story, your own part you want to tell, and we're going to place you on a platform called Speak Up and the Yay Council through the state of DSS, South Carolina, that allows you now to be purposeful in your approach of changing the system versus just angry in your approach. So the coupling of all that is big bet number 1, or big idea number 1. A second big idea is tied to your favorite, sibling care, as you mentioned on the second page. And that is, yes, we take care of 40 sibling sets, often relationships with the birth parent. The parent has frayed, and now we come in and make sure the sibling set does not fray. And adoptive parties who are scrambling to help these children are seeing these sibling sets respond to each other. And now we've seen evidence that they maintain these sibling visits afterwards, after we're involved, and sometimes even adopt more than one child as a result. Kudos, great, but that's only 40 children.
Yeah.
40 sibling sets, over 100 children. I want, big time, in 2023, a sibling transport system for every child in foster care who's separated from their sibling to have a transport system that says, the case manager says, fostering good ideas, we need the sibling set to get together. You know all the community partners. You have the discounts at all the cool places. You have all the YMCAs and all the churches behind you. Will you put together a great sibling visit? I'll be there, but I would love for you to put it together and for you to build out the transport system so I know all the kids, wherever they're located, are all going to make it.
Amen.
Amen. That is doable, and I'm in conversation with the state about whether they give us the green light, and they are certainly
Do you mean
showing
the
an interest.
green light?
No, truly the green light of saying, not only do we like your concept, which definitively the state leadership does, but we are going to be behind it as a supportive mechanism. So our case teams know that this is an approach.
Yeah.
And kudos, the state thinks through these things with me. So I really appreciate it. Those are 2 great ideas. We got several others, but that's all I got for now.
Okay. So we will link the website. Is there a contact us button on the website?
There is.
Okay. So we'll link the website in the show notes so people can contact you directly.
Yeah, that's fun.
And get quizzed by David about what they learned. Man, thank you so much for coming on. This was great. I think super educational, certainly to me and probably to our listeners. So I'll close this by, I feel compelled to pray for those sibling groups.
Excellent.
So we'll do that. Lord, we love you. We thank you for today. We thank you for the opportunity to wake up and to learn something new, Father. I thank you for David. Thank you for his heart to care for others, to be a change agent in the relational world, especially as it relates to youth in foster care, Father. I pray for those sibling groups that are separated from each other, Father. I can't imagine the trauma that would create, in addition to the traumas that they're already experiencing. So, Father, I'm compelled to pray that in the absence of their sibling, that you would make yourself known to them, that you would be the comfort. But Lord, I pray a blessing over this bold concept that David's come up with to connect these sibling groups back together. Father, I have to believe that that's close to your heart. So I pray that you would help that to be accomplished, and that you would be with each one of those kids. Lord, ultimately we pray that you would return their family to health so they can go back home. And if that is not your will, that you would provide a safe avenue that they can be stable, and ultimately, Lord, that they can be together with their brothers and sisters. We love you. We trust you. We thank you for today. In Jesus' name, amen. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.